Would like to welcome you to BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. Professor, on yesterday, June 25th, 2013, the Supreme Court changed a provision in the Voting Rights Act that would disaffect the southern states?
Yes, the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional the formula to be used for the pre-clearance activity under the Voting Rights Act. This process by which, if election laws are changed, they have to be reviewed by the Justice Department. It was a disgraceful decision on several dimensions. First of all, the court violated things which it has said are important with respect to deference to Congress as to detail. I mean, Congress reconsidered this matter and reenacted with some adjustments the Voting Rights Act, and going by earlier decisions in other cases, the court should have given some deference to the Congress as to the details, as to the formula. Of course, it violated the principle of stare decisis, of kind of relying on earlier decisions, but also, as Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg pointed out, it was unrealistic. She wrote the dissenting opinion in terms of its view of the world. But as disgraceful as the opinion is, I'm hoping that we don't regard it, and we shouldn't, as being disabling. Another thing that has changed...
In other words, Donnie, don't be too discouraged. There's still light.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. We have now, particularly in the South, are much more in the game politically. There are thousands of elected officials that are African Americans and Latino and other minorities and women. We are probably the most sophisticated major group. Even with the last presidential election, we had the highest vote turnout in the nation. African Americans,
highest voting demographic in the last election.
That is correct. That's the first time that occurred. And so even without this particular provision of the Voting Act being enforced, the black folks are not going to be put back to the past with respect to elections. We've got
so this was all.
Power
this
now.
Was to be expected.
Well, what this is
I mean,
what we are examining is the consequence of elections. You know, it shows that elections have consequences. This is a consequence of the election and the re-election of George Bush. One consequence of the election of a president is that they get to appoint Supreme Court justices who serve for years, sometimes decades after the presidential term is over. And Bush put on the court Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Alito, and there's every reason to believe that they're going to be there a while. So people ought to keep that in mind.
Be there and make decisions that would be in line with the Republican way of thinking?
Sure, but as we go forward, people ought to keep in mind when they may have some difficulty with a presidential candidate, a Democratic candidate, and they don't agree with that person on everything, that one matter that must be kept in mind is that whoever is elected is likely to be able to appoint some justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I saw in the last election times when people would say, oh, it doesn't really make a big difference, or they would not be as helpful, let's say, to Barack Obama because they disagreed with him on some detail. Well,
and you know what? As you mentioned Barack Obama, he was noted in the decision for the voting rights.
Well, they observed that this is Africa.
You got a black president. What are you black people complaining about?
Sure. But as Justice Ginsburg points out, the other argument is, yes, we now have a black president because the Voting Rights Act provided mechanisms that increase the participation of minorities in elections, and made it not possible, made it more difficult, at least in some parts of the country, to adopt measures that reduce their participation. But black folks are resilient people. Even without this act, the political participation is going to continue, and it's going to continue to grow.
Professor, in America, they tell me that children under 5, that the white children are now being outnumbered when it comes to children under 5, such that by the year 2040, the demographics of America will be changed. It will be quite browner. So does this Supreme Court decision, is this the Republican Party holding on to the vestiges of white superiority in terms of political dominance in America?
This has been always a country of immigrants. And there was a period of time when the largest number of immigrants came from Europe. Well, that's no longer the case. And so naturally there's a shift in the demographics of the country. The more immigrants come to this country from other parts of the world other than Europe. So understandably, there is a change in the demographic makeup of the nation. That's just the process, that's the history of this country. This country has been replenished in energy and in creativity by these successive waves of immigrants from different parts of the world. That's a plus. It has been one of the things that has renewed this country and kept this country strong.
Are you optimistic about the future as it relates to African Americans? I mean, you've worked on a number of campaigns and you're politically involved. What do you foresee? I mean, especially in light of this country's incarceration record. I mean, we incarcerate 1/4 of the world's inmates, half of them are black men.
Well, this country is not completed as it relates to realizing its articulated goals of liberty and justice and equality for all. And we still have work to do. But the nature of the work changes.
How so?
Well, we have gotten pretty much rid of legal discrimination, legal segregation. Now the battle shifts to a more economic realm where different kind of leaders and different techniques have to be used, and so it's a journey. This process that's going to continue. And
You're being polite. Bill Cosby Bill Cosby's been a little, tough on the African American community. He's speaking to self-responsibility, what we can do for ourselves.
Well, I see an awful lot of black people, men, women, parents, who day in and day out are meeting their responsibility. One can choose to focus on those who are not, or to pay attention to the millions that are doing exactly what they ought to be doing.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, we're still inspired. Any final thoughts on yesterday's Supreme Court decision?
Again, as I said, it was a disgraceful decision, but we should not regard it as being a disabling decision. We are resilient. We are resilient people, and we will overcome.
Thank you. The one and only Professor Larry Gibson. Keep watching BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth.